She was told to wait outside the hangar. No explanation. No clearance. Just a quiet reminder that she was not on the flight rotation and had not been for months. Inside, the scramble order was already being drafted. Maps were unrolled. Airspace markers lit. And no one mentioned her name. Then the alert came: fast movers breaching the corridor, a situation escalating faster than the chain of command could react. The tower hesitated. The roster was empty. And that's when everything changed. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't defiance. It was one aircraft, already fueled, one pilot, already prepared, and a decision made without permission, but at precisely the right time. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, please consider subscribing to hear more untold stories of extraordinary service and the heroes who walk among us, never asking for the recognition they deserve. The wind slid low across the concrete, tugging at loose tarps and scattering powdered grit against the line of grounded fighters. The tarmac radiated a heat that had nothing to do with the sun, which hadn't yet cleared the ridge, even in the early hour. The metal skin of the aircraft shimmered faintly, breathing out warmth stored from yesterday. Everything else was quiet. Kelly walked with her gloves looped through her belt and her flight card tucked flat beneath one arm. Her boots left dull scuffs on the faded paint lines, but no one noticed. The main hangar lights were already on behind her. She hadn't been inside. No one had called her name. She moved without aim, or at least without any mission assigned to guide her steps. The rhythm of it was habit. She passed a row of refueling carts, clipped to their stanchions with brake locks still engaged. The last one had a low-pressure valve half-seated. She knelt to tighten it, then stood and kept walking. No clipboard, no signature, no thanks. Voices carried from the tent near the command post, muffled by canvas and distance. Pilots in light gear ran through morning briefs, their words clipped and sure, the way men spoke when they knew their time would be spent in the air. She passed near enough to hear one mention a corridor window, something about pressure shift north of the ridge, but the details weren't for her. She kept her eyes forward. No one stepped aside to let her through. No one blocked her either. She was an invisible presence on the edge of everything official. A single jet stood on the far line, nose angled west, not quite in shadow. Its canopy was shut, but the covers had been removed. Fuel tanks slung tight underwing, panels sealed, no markings on the loadout pylon. But the torque collar on the main gear had been wiped down recently. It was prepped, not scrubbed for media, not decaled for exercise, just functional. That meant someone had taken it seriously at some point. She stopped beside it, ran her fingers just above the intake lip. Not touching, just reading the dust line. There wasn't much. She climbed onto the platform and checked the external fuel gauge. 60%. One forward hardpoint loaded. Clean wing. No one had logged it for rotation. She tapped the gauge lightly with the back of her knuckle and then stepped down. No one said anything. No one was watching. She passed a maintenance crew rerouting extension coils near the eastern pad. One of the younger techs nodded toward her, almost as an afterthought. He didn't make eye contact. She didn't expect him to. He probably didn't know her name. Just someone in a suit, walking between things. Not important. The morning unfolded with the same deliberate pace. Kelly returned to the equipment rack near the utility shed and opened a low drawer. Inside, her flight card still sat unlogged. Its surface was unmarked except for the embossed name strip at the top. Below it, the clearance boxes were empty. She hadn't flown in 12 days. Not since the last exercise flight had been pulled for political optics. Not that they had told her why. She slipped the card back in place and closed the drawer. The sun had risen just far enough to throw hard angles across the flight line. Radios began to chatter faintly on shared channels. Static, then cross-checks. Nothing sharp, nothing urgent. just routine loops. Kelly walked to the edge of the pad where the concrete met the gravel apron and stood there, looking out toward the sky beyond the perimeter fence. She didn't speak. She didn't shift her weight. She waited. A low chime came from her hip. She unclipped the portable terminal and held it at chest height. The screen took a second to adjust. 1 radar pulse, then 2. Transponder ID blank. Altitude band climbing fast from the eastern shelf. 2 unknown aircraft, vectoring toward the corridor. 60 nautical miles and closing. She lowered the screen. Her face didn't change. No one was looking. No one had noticed. But she had. The alert tone snapped across the portable terminal again, louder this time. 2 fast-moving radar contacts, both above 20,000 feet, entered the corridor from the eastern edge. No transponder signal, no comms handshake. The vector path arced directly toward the contested zone. Kelly glanced back toward the main tent, where a small group of officers stood bunched around the comm table. One of them, a captain with half-zipped gear, was already speaking into his headset. His tone was sharp, but not panicked. She caught one word through the wind elevation. Another voice cut in over the general channel. This one from the tower. They had the blips, too. Possible supersonic breach. The tags hadn't resolved, but the speed and silhouette screamed it clear enough. Su-27s. A beat passed. Then another. Inside the tent. Someone hesitated. The rotation board was empty. Every ready pilot had already been cleared out for escort duty earlier that morning. The flight line had nothing airborne. No one in position. No response came from the ranking officer. Too many people speaking at once. Too much protocol. The voice on the tower frequency finally said what they all knew. No aircraft were cleared for intercept. They were blind. Kelly turned. She walked back toward the unassigned F-16 parked alone at the edge of the apron. Its wing tanks sat underfilled. Maybe enough for 20 minutes on burner. The hard points were partially loaded. Nothing long range, but enough to matter if used with precision. The sensor mount was older, and the radar profile had drifted over time, but she had studied its quirks months ago. It tracked slow in humidity. Double pings in crosswind. She could compensate. She stepped onto the access ladder, pressed her palm against the side rail, and paused. No one was shouting her name. No one was issuing an order. They were still frozen in the tent, waiting for clearance that would not come in time. She opened the side panel and placed her flight card on the console. In the blank signature line, she wrote her name in small, clean letters. Under mission field, she wrote 3 words, no clearance given. She pulled the canopy release lever and stepped down. Her helmet waited in the locker beside the support station. No squadron tag, no paint. She placed it under one arm and returned to the aircraft. The pre-flight checklist went faster than she expected. The fuel reading hovered at 61%, weapons green. Sensor warm-up already pulsed low on the internal display. Someone had prepped this bird. They just hadn't been brave enough to fly it without approval. She climbed into the cockpit and sealed the canopy with a hard snap. The sound echoed through the half-empty tarmac. No one moved to stop her. Her gloved fingers moved through the start sequence in silence. One switch, then another. The engine began to hum. Pressure built under the seat. The airframe shifted forward slightly with the surge. Hydraulics came alive. On her left, 2 technicians turned toward the noise. Their mouths moved. One stepped forward, hesitated, then stopped. No one lifted a radio. No alarm sounded. She keyed her internal circuit to standby. The control tower voice finally crackled in again. Half a beat late. Repeat. No clearance granted. All aircraft hold position. She didn't answer. The jet rolled forward, slow and clean, off the chocks and onto the taxi line. She tapped the brakes twice to test the pedal tension. Solid. Her headset buzzed again. Static mixed with nervous breath. A different voice this time. Female. Nervous. Possibly control assistant. Repeat. No assigned sortie. Do not proceed. The sky above had begun to flatten with light. The radar contacts were now 35 nautical miles out, angling inward. One had dropped to low altitude. The other held steady. Kelly lined up at the threshold. The runway stretched in a clear line ahead. No vehicles, no obstruction. She set throttle to idle and released brake hold. The jet surged forward. The tires bit into the tarmac and began to lift. A second of resistance, then momentum pushed her down into the seat. Her hands stayed steady. She kept the climb shallow, below radar sweep, then broke hard left to gain altitude through the terrain gap south of the ridge. The F-16 snapped clean into sky. No acknowledgement. No call sign. Only the low roar of burn and the sharp spike of her HUD as it found the first blip. Below her, the tower went silent. The corridor had a gap in it. She was already inside. The sky was clean at 10,000 feet, but that clarity felt artificial. Wind rolled across the canopy in a faint whine, and below her, the ridgeline carved sharp shadows against the corridor floor. Kelly angled her throttle just below afterburner and kept her profile tight, hugging the terrain as close as the wing clearance allowed. Her radar blinked twice. Low signal. Then again. She knew the Su-27s were close now. The first contact appeared at 24 nautical miles. High speed, climbing. The other lagged behind, angled wider, a pincer pattern. She guessed the lead was bait. The second would swing in for a rear intercept once she committed. Old tactic. Still worked when nobody talked back. She didn't brake left or right. Not yet. Her HUD flickered slightly near the top corner, a hairline crack refracting the sun just enough to distort. She compensated, cross-referencing altitude with the laminated chart on her knee pad. It was faded but accurate. Terrain models from a recon survey 6 weeks ago. She'd memorized the ridgeline cuts where radar dropped off and atmospheric interference crept in. She slid lower and held the turn shallow. 15 nautical miles. The first Su-27 adjusted, braking level. The second still hung back, coasting in a wide arc. Kelly narrowed her visual sweep. No chatter came through the comms. Too much interference. Intentions were being written with velocity and trajectory now. She dipped into the canyon line and pulled a tight right, climbing slightly to set up a vertical intercept path. Her F-16 responded with a hard vibrato under the frame. She dialed back just enough to keep speed stable. 11 nautical miles, no way to hide now. They had her. She pushed into climb. Her first missile lock tone came fast, steady, and urgent. One of the Su-27s had a fix. She didn't flinch. She'd guessed it would come now. She pulled into a high G roll, inverted, dropped flares, then broke left at maximum speed. The lock faded, lost to terrain and countermeasure confusion. Her vision blurred for a moment as blood pulled low. She rode it out. The ridge wall curved. She rolled upright, reacquired bearing, and found the lead Su-27 breaking down toward her. It was coming fast, confident. She didn't try to outrun it. Instead, she pitched up hard into a near vertical climb. She gave the illusion of exposure, of being on the run, even as her fingers danced across the throttle and her eyes tracked the vapor trails above. The Su-27 bit. It followed her climb, engines screaming hot, trying to pin her in altitude. She let him chase. At 23,000 feet, she cut throttle to idle, rolled into a half corkscrew dive, and let gravity draw her into a controlled freefall. The Su-27 hesitated half a second, unsure of the brake pattern. That was enough. She flicked her switch, rearmed lock, and came up under its belly. Her tone rang. She fired one. The sky lit with the flare trail, a clean arc. The Su-27 tried to bank, but it was too high, too late, too exposed. The detonation was instant, just a flash, then debris tumbling, no flame trail, no drama, just metal disassembling in silence. She pulled hard to the left and dropped altitude again. The second Su-27 came alive behind her, engine screaming at full burn. Its profile appeared sharply on her HUD, lower than she'd guessed. It had waited, stayed out of range. Now it hunted. She twisted through the canyon edge, pushing low and fast, watching her radar bloom with feedback as the jet moved to flank. It had the speed advantage, longer burn range, bigger missiles. She had terrain and timing. She dropped chaff, cut thrust, banked into a blind ravine, and let the earth cover her for 5 seconds. The Su-27 overshot, climbing to reacquire. She punched back into the climb, arced wide right, and waited. The Su-27 began to dip back toward her projected line. That was the move she needed. She reversed thrust, rolled belly up, and cut behind the ridgeline in a tight barrel turn that nearly crushed her vision. The stress on the frame shook her bones, her breath locked in her chest. The Su-27 banked again, trying to reorient. She climbed under it at an angle, let the auto-tracker lag just long enough, then flipped her missile system active and forced a signal lock by manual override. Her HUD blinked. She fired one more. The second Su-27 tried to brake. The missile caught its rear quarter in a pulse of heat and a spray of cloud fracture. It didn't explode. It spun, systems fried, engines cutting. Kelly kept her climb until the tail vanished below the haze layer. She leveled out at 20,000 feet. The silence returned. No enemy radar. No more pings. The sky belonged to her again. She adjusted her heading toward the base and dropped low. Her fuel sat just under 1/3, enough to make it back if she didn't burn too hot. She set throttle to conserve and began her descent path. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. Her hands stayed steady on the controls as the terrain rolled beneath her again. The corridor was clear. She flew home alone. The wheels touched down harder than she expected, skimming slightly off-center before locking clean against the tarmac. Her braking was controlled, but the slight stagger in the right landing gear made the nose veer just enough to draw attention. Not that it mattered. Everyone was already watching. The canopy was streaked with burn residue and pressure lines from altitude frost. One side had a faint web of scratches where debris had struck, likely from the first engagement. She cut the engine and let the wind finish the final roll. Her fuel gauge blinked in low amber. Below 100.0 pounds remaining. Ground crew jogged forward. 2 techs in orange vests and a logistics runner from the tower. They slowed when they got close. Unsure. Her name hadn't been on the flight board. No order had been issued. No one had cleared this takeoff. She popped the canopy but didn't move yet. The rush of warm air filled the cockpit, thick with exhaust and dust. She unstrapped her harness in silence. Her hands were clean. No trembling. Just the quiet click of each buckle and the slight groan of her shoulders lifting from the seat. The techs hovered just short of the ladder. One of them opened his mouth, then closed it. No one reached for her. She descended one step at a time and dropped lightly to the concrete. Her boots landed steady. She carried her helmet in both hands like it held something fragile. A grease mark ran down one side where her head had leaned against the canopy during descent. Behind her, a junior officer from the command tent had stepped out with a portable terminal. She saw him glance at the screen, then back to the aircraft. His face tightened. He didn't call for her. He didn't speak to anyone. Farther down the runway, one of the intercept crew chiefs stood near the comm tower with a radio headset still clipped to his ear. His stance was uneven. No movement. Just watching. The logistics runner took a step closer. "Ma'am," he said, then stopped. His eyes went to the fuselage. The paint scorched along the trailing edge. The loadout rack empty. The HUD flickering through shutdown code. Kelly didn't answer. She walked past him toward the hangar pad. The command tent door opened wider. A small group of officers came out, 2 from air control, 1 from intel. They didn't look angry. Not yet. Just uncertain. As if the event unfolding didn't quite match the checklist they were trained to follow. Inside the tower, a single voice broke over the radio channel. Female. Calm, but shaken. "We have satellite confirmation. 2 Su-27s down. Impact markers confirmed on the eastern approach. 1 registered crash site. 1 probable detonation. No Allied losses reported." There was a pause. "Intercept data confirms approach trajectory matched the relief convoy route. They were targeting the humanitarian drop line." The words settled like fog across the pad. Kelly didn't look up. She kept walking until she reached the edge of the crew bay where her flight card still sat in the open tray. She reached for it without a word. The corner was smudged with oil now. She didn't try to clean it. She folded it once and slid it into the side pocket of her flight suit. The junior officer from intel finally spoke. His voice was soft, not dramatic, just exact. She just stopped a war. The air didn't change, but the weight inside it did. No one moved to congratulate her. No one offered a hand. But no one looked away either. Kelly stood at the edge of the hangar, helmet in one hand, dust rising at her feet. For the first time all morning, no one was telling her what she wasn't allowed to do. The meeting room smelled faintly of coffee gone cold. No one touched the carafe at the center of the table. The air inside was dry, chilled by the wall unit humming quietly in the background. A digital screen displayed mission logs scrolling across the left margin. And in the top corner, two grainy satellite images sat still, one plume of smoke rising from a tree line, the other a crumpled wreck on a coastal slope. Time-stamped. Verified. Kelly stood at attention just inside the doorway. Her flight suit was clean again, but the collar still bore a faint trace of hydraulic oil. She hadn't been asked to change. She hadn't been offered a chair. Across from her sat Colonel David Herron, the base commander. To his left, the operations lead from Mission Control. To his right, a quiet man from Satellite Intelligence, unnamed and unused to speaking. They didn't invite her forward. They simply acknowledged her presence with a nod and kept their posture formal. The colonel's voice was steady, not warm, not cold, measured. "You understand your flight this morning was unsanctioned." Kelly nodded once. No verbal clearance, no rotation placement, no scramble order logged. Another nod. He paused, tapping the side of a tablet with his knuckle. The display flickered, then settled again. "You also intercepted 2 hostile aircraft in a contested corridor, avoided all Allied radar, deployed countermeasures within threat proximity, and destroyed both targets with no civilian or friendly casualties." Kelly said nothing. The operations lead shifted slightly, glancing at her with something close to curiosity. His posture had changed since the last time they had been in the same room. Then, he hadn't known her name. The colonel continued. "Satellite verification confirms those aircraft were on a coordinated vector toward the relief column based out of Sector Echo. That convoy was protected by non-military status. If the strike had occurred, we would be dealing with a violation involving 3 separate governments." He didn't need to explain the consequences. They were already in the reports. "For the record," he added, voice flat, "you did not have permission to act." Kelly looked him in the eye. Understood. He exhaled slowly, then reached into the folder beside his tablet and withdrew a single form. The room went still as he slid it across the table toward her. "This is your formal return to active combat status, effective immediately." The words were printed without embellishment. No ceremonial phrase, no medal, just a title, a rank confirmation, and a line at the bottom where someone had typed in her name. "Pilot Kelly, status cleared." He reached into the drawer behind him and set a small flight patch on the table's edge. It bore no call sign, just a single stitched tag beneath the standard emblem. The threadwork read, "Rotation Alpha, confirmed." Kelly stepped forward and took the patch with one hand. She didn't fold it. She didn't speak. The man from Satellite Intelligence stood without prompting. He gathered his tablet, gave a quiet nod toward the colonel, and left without a word. The operations lead leaned back and scratched at the corner of his jaw, then stood and walked to the rotation board on the far wall. He tapped twice, brought up a new window, and began to type. Kelly's name appeared under live rotation, 3rd slot from the top. Her next sortie was marked for the following cycle. No one clapped, no one saluted, but no one objected either. The colonel looked at her one last time, his expression unreadable. Dismissed. Pilot. She nodded and turned toward the door. As she stepped into the hallway, the overhead light flickered once. The buzz of aircraft noise returned faintly through the outer wall. She moved with steady purpose back toward the hangar. In her locker, she placed the folded flight card into a narrow envelope, sealed it, and slid it behind the panel above her gear shelf. She did not throw it away. The patch went on her arm. The training room held 12 chairs, and not one of them was built for comfort. The lights were kept low to avoid glare on the screens, but the projector still hummed loud enough to fill the silence between questions. A map of the forward corridor hung on the wall. Corners curled slightly from heat and time. A half-finished radar scan flickered across the monitor at the front. Most of the young pilots didn't look up from their notepads. Kelly stood near the edge of the room, one boot hooked casually behind the other, her hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. She didn't wear a patch. Her uniform bore no decoration, only the standard field stripes and her nameplate. Her helmet sat on the table beside her, clean and new, with a single label along the side. It read, Spectre. No one had asked why. Not yet. She tapped a finger against the edge of her logbook. It was smaller than standard issue, bound in dark vinyl with corners that had been worn smooth. No pages were missing, but some were thinned by weather and use. Inside, the entries weren't in formal order. They had been written by hand, row after row of notes on elevation bands, wind shears, throttle response curves, and pressure drops over terrain ridges, coordinates, fuel ratios. Not a single word about mission outcomes. One of the new pilots leaned forward, the youngest of the group. His sleeves were rolled too tightly and his boots still looked fresh from inspection. He squinted at her book. "Ma'am," he asked, "why doesn't your logbook show squadron details? There's no call sign, no unit stamp, just locations and burn rates." Kelly didn't answer right away. She closed the book slowly and placed it flat on the table. "Because you don't fly to be seen," she said. "You fly to solve the problem." Another pilot chuckled quietly near the back. He masked it well, but not well enough. Kelly heard it and chose not to look in his direction. She pointed to the corridor map behind her. Some missions won't come with a mission number. Some threats won't be announced on comms. You won't always get the full chain of command in time. What you'll have is the sky, your instruments, and your timing. A third pilot, one who had not spoken yet, raised a hand with hesitation. "How do you know when it's the right time?" Kelly gave a small nod. "You won't always know. But if you've trained enough, if you've studied what no one else bothers to study, your decision will come at speed, and you won't second guess it. That doesn't mean you won't carry the weight later. It just means you'll live long enough to carry it." She let the sentence settle before continuing. "You won't always be on the board. You might be the last pilot standing beside the wrong jet on the wrong day. That doesn't matter. What matters is whether the moment finds you ready." They listened now. The earlier silence had been passive. Now it was focused. Kelly picked up her helmet, rotated it once in her hands, and nodded toward the exits. That's all. The chairs shifted. Some stood slowly. No one spoke. No one tried to shake her hand. She liked it that way. Outside, the air was cool enough to sting at the throat. The pre-dawn haze clung low across the tarmac, rising in long threads that broke against the landing gear of the aircraft parked on the edge of the apron. Floodlights hummed over the taxi lane, casting shadows that stretched and bent over concrete and steel. Her F-16 waited near the far line, nose pointed south, canopy gleaming faintly under the lights. The fuselage bore no numbering sequence. Only the word Spectre had been stenciled clean across the intake curve. Kelly moved with practiced rhythm, no excess movement. Her gloves were already laced through her belt. Her helmet was strapped to her side. At the locker bay, she checked the seal on her oxygen hose, tightened the line on her flight vest, and took the folded logbook from her shelf. She did not open it. She slid it into the side pouch of her flight bag and shut the locker door behind her. The crew chief waiting by the aircraft didn't speak. He simply handed her the final checklist. She initialed the line beside the preload signature. Then, with no ceremony, she climbed into the cockpit, seated herself, and began her own sequence one switch at a time. No hesitation. The canopy came down slowly, sealing out the rising wind. She didn't need a reminder. Her name was already on the rotation. Her aircraft was live. She had nothing left to prove. The sky would never say thank you, but it had made space for her. And now she flew inside it, not as an exception, not as a risk, but as the one who had already answered the question. In a world where recognition often follows rank and permission, her story reminds us that true strength comes not from titles, but from timing, conviction, and the courage to act when no one else will. She was overlooked, uninvited, and written off, yet, when the moment arrived, she did not hesitate. She flew not for glory, but because someone had to. And when the silence cleared, the system that once excluded her had no choice but to let her in. This was never about rebellion. It was about readiness, about proving, without speaking, that quiet excellence holds the line long before it is seen. If this journey moved you, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Reflect on the quiet heroes in your own life. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, consider following for more untold accounts of courage, precision, and the power of showing up.